I still remember the day I first walked into that yoga studio. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon, and I was feeling particularly down about my life. I had just gone through a difficult breakup 3 months prior, and despite my best efforts to move on, I found myself stuck in a cycle of self-doubt and loneliness. My name is Alex, and at 28, I thought I had my life figured out. I had a decent job as a graphic designer at a small marketing firm, a cozy apartment in the city, and a small circle of friends who I could count on. But something was missing. I felt disconnected from myself, like I was just going through the motions without any real purpose or joy. My friend Jordan had been suggesting yoga for months. It's not just about flexibility, she'd say. It's about connecting with yourself. I had always brushed off the suggestion, thinking yoga was just another fitness trend that wasn't for me. But that rainy Tuesday, something changed. Maybe it was the weather, or maybe I had finally reached a point where I was desperate enough to try anything that might help me feel better. So, I found myself standing outside Harmony Yoga, staring at the entrance like it was some kind of portal to another dimension. The moment I stepped inside, I was enveloped by the scent of sandalwood and the soft sounds of ambient music. The studio was warm and inviting, with soft lighting and plants scattered throughout the space. I approached the front desk hesitantly, feeling out of place in my hastily purchased yoga pants and old college t-shirt. That's when I saw him for the first time. Mason. He was behind the counter, organizing some papers, and when he looked up and smiled at me, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, a flutter of interest, a spark of connection. Mason was tall, with broad shoulders and a lean build that spoke of someone who took care of their body. His dark hair was pulled back in a small bun, and he had the kind of eyes that seemed to see right through you, warm, intelligent, and somehow both calming and exciting at the same time. When he spoke, his voice was deep and melodious, with a hint of an accent I couldn't quite place. "First time?" he asked, and I nodded, suddenly feeling even more self-conscious. But his smile widened, and he said, "Well, you've come to the right place. Everyone starts somewhere." He explained the different classes they offered, and I found myself hanging on his every word. There was something about the way he spoke about yoga, with such passion and conviction, that made me want to experience it through his eyes. When I mentioned I was completely new to yoga and feeling a bit intimidated, his expression softened. "You know," he said, leaning slightly over the counter, "I could teach you the basics if you'd like, just to get you comfortable before you join a group class." I was taken aback by his offer. Was this something he did for all newcomers, or was there something more to it? Either way, I found myself saying yes before I could overthink it. We arranged to meet the following evening after the studio closed for a private introductory session. As I left the studio that day, I felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness that I hadn't experienced in years. It was like being a teenager again, with all those butterflies and uncertainties. The next day seemed to drag on forever. I couldn't focus on my work, my mind constantly drifting to thoughts of Mason and our upcoming session. What would it be like? Would I make a fool of myself? Would there be that same connection I thought I felt the day before? By the time I arrived at the studio that evening, my heart was racing, and not just from the brisk walk from the parking lot. The studio was different in the evening, quieter, more intimate. Mason had dimmed the lights and lit a few candles, creating an atmosphere that felt both serene and slightly romantic. He greeted me with that same warm smile, and I felt my nervousness begin to melt away. "Ready to discover yoga?" he asked, and I nodded, trying to appear more confident than I felt. He started by explaining the philosophy behind yoga, how it was more than just physical postures, but a way to unite the body, mind, and spirit. Yoga means union in Sanskrit, he told me as we sat cross-legged on our mats. It's about finding harmony within yourself and with the world around you. The way he spoke about it made it sound like something sacred, something transformative, and I found myself wanting to experience that transformation. We began with some simple breathing exercises. "Breath is the foundation of yoga," Mason explained. "It's what connects the mind and body." He guided me through deep, intentional breaths, encouraging me to feel the air filling my lungs, to notice the rise and fall of my chest. His voice was hypnotic, and I found myself relaxing into the practice, the stresses of the day fading away. From there, we moved into some basic poses: mountain pose, forward fold, downward dog. Mason was an attentive teacher, gently correcting my alignment with a touch on my shoulder or a guiding hand on my back. Each touch sent a small shiver through me, a reminder of the attraction I felt towards him. But there was also something deeply respectful about the way he taught, a professionalism that made me feel safe and valued. After about 30 minutes of basic poses, Mason suggested we try something different. Yoga isn't just about individual practice, he said. It can also be about connection with others. Partner yoga can be a powerful way to build trust and deepen your practice. He must have seen the apprehension on my face because he quickly added, only if you're comfortable with it, of course. I hesitated for a moment, but curiosity won out. I'm willing to try, I said, and the smile he gave me in return made my heart skip a beat. He explained that we would start with a simple partner pose called seated back-to-back breathing. We sat with our backs pressed against each other, and I could feel the warmth of his body through our thin yoga shirts. Now, just breathe, he instructed. Feel how your breath affects your partner, and how theirs affects you. It was an incredibly intimate experience, feeling the expansion of his ribcage against mine, syncing our breaths until it felt like we were breathing as one. I closed my eyes, allowing myself to be fully present in the moment, aware of every point of contact between us. There was something profoundly connecting about it, a wordless communication that felt more honest than any conversation. After a few minutes of this, Mason suggested we try another partner pose. This one requires a bit more trust, he said, standing up and offering me his hand. I took it, noticing how perfectly my hand fit in his. He positioned us facing each other, about arm's length apart. This is a variation of tree pose, he explained. We'll each stand on one leg, with our free foot pressed against our inner thigh, and we'll hold onto each other for balance. As we moved into the pose, our hands clasped together between us, I found myself looking directly into his eyes. There was a moment of recognition, a silent acknowledgement of the connection that was building between us. We held the pose, steady and strong, supporting each other. This is what yoga is about, Mason said softly. Finding balance and strength through connection. The pose evolved, and soon we were in what Mason called partner boat pose, sitting facing each other with our legs extended, feet touching, hands clasped. It was challenging, requiring core strength and trust in equal measure. As we held the pose, both of us breathing heavily from the exertion, Mason's eyes never left mine. You're doing amazing, he encouraged, and I felt a flush of pride in something else, desire. Our final pose was the most intimate yet. Mason called it heart to heart, and it involved us sitting cross-legged, facing each other, with our foreheads touching and hands on each other's hearts. Feel the energy between us, he whispered, and I could, a tangible current flowing from his heart to mine and back again. We stayed like that for what felt like both an eternity and not long enough, breathing together, hearts beating in sync. When we finally separated, there was a charged silence between us. I felt exposed, vulnerable, but in the most beautiful way. Mason looked at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. That's not usually how I teach a first yoga class, he admitted with a small laugh. But there's something about you, Alex. I felt it the moment you walked into the studio. I found the courage to be honest. I felt it too, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. This connection, it's not something I was expecting to find in a yoga class. Mason moved closer, his hand gently touching my cheek. Yoga has a way of bringing people together who are meant to find each other, he said. And then, with a question in his eyes, he leaned in. I met him halfway, and our lips touched in a kiss that felt like coming home. It was gentle, exploratory, filled with the same mindfulness and intention as our yoga practice had been. When we pulled apart, both of us were smiling. So, Mason said, a playful glint in his eye, same time next week for your second lesson? I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. I wouldn't miss it for the world, I replied. That first yoga session marked the beginning of something beautiful. Over the following weeks, Mason and I continued our private yoga sessions, each one deepening both our practice and our connection. We explored more challenging poses, building strength and flexibility, but also trust and intimacy. After each session, we would talk for hours, getting to know each other beyond the yoga mat. I learned that Mason had discovered yoga during a difficult period in his own life. After a sports injury ended his dreams of becoming a professional soccer player, he had fallen into depression. Yoga had been his salvation, teaching him that there were many paths to fulfillment and that sometimes our greatest disappointments lead us to our true calling. He had been teaching for 5 years and had opened Harmony Yoga just a year ago, pouring all his savings and passion into creating a space where others could find the healing he had. As for me, I opened up about my creative struggles, how I felt stifled in my current job, yearning to create art that was meaningful rather than just commercially viable. Mason listened with genuine interest, encouraging me to reconnect with my passion for art through mindfulness practices. He even suggested I design some new artwork for the studio, giving me a project that reignited my creative spark. Our relationship wasn't without its challenges. About 2 months in, we hit our first real obstacle. Mason had been increasingly busy with the studio, taking on more classes to cover for an instructor who had left unexpectedly. Our time together became limited, and I found myself feeling insecure, wondering if his feelings for me were waning. Instead of communicating my fears, I withdrew, canceling our planned yoga session with a flimsy excuse. Mason showed up at my apartment that evening, concern written all over his face. "What's really going on, Alex?" he asked once I let him in. The directness of his question broke through my defenses, and all my insecurities came pouring out. My fear that he was losing interest, my worry that I wasn't enough, my old patterns of expecting relationships to fail. Mason listened without interruption, and when I finally ran out of words, he took my hands in his. "In yoga, we learn to observe our thoughts without judgment," he said. "We acknowledge them, but we don't let them control us. Your fears are valid, Alex, but they're not reality. I'm not pulling away. I'm falling in love with you." His confession stunned me into silence. Love. It was a word I had been afraid to even think, let alone hear. But hearing it from Mason's lips made it feel right, natural, like the next pose in a flowing sequence. "I'm falling in love with you too," I admitted, and the smile that lit up his face was brighter than any I had seen before. That night, we practiced yoga together in my small living room, moving through a gentle flow that felt like a dance, a celebration of our newfound honesty. And afterward, when we made love for the first time, it was with the same mindfulness and connection that characterized our yoga practice, present, intentional, and deeply intimate. As the months passed, our relationship continued to grow and evolve. Mason introduced me to the yoga community at Harmony, and I found a sense of belonging I hadn't realized I was missing. I started attending group classes, no longer intimidated but excited to deepen my practice. And when Mason suggested I might consider teacher training myself, I was surprised by how right the idea felt. My creativity flourished as well. The artwork I created for the studio received so many compliments that I began to believe in my abilities again. I started working on a series of paintings inspired by yoga poses, capturing the beauty and strength of the human body in motion. When a local gallery owner who practiced at Harmony saw my work, she offered me a spot in an upcoming exhibition. The night of the exhibition opening, Mason stood proudly by my side as people admired my paintings. "You've always had this in you," he whispered, squeezing my hand. "Yoga just helped you find your way back to it." And I knew he was right. Through yoga, and through loving Mason, I had reconnected with parts of myself I had forgotten existed. 6 months after that first yoga session, Mason and I were co-teaching a partner yoga workshop at Harmony. As we demonstrated the heart-to-heart pose to the class, I was struck by how far we had come. What had begun as a simple offer to teach yoga had blossomed into a relationship that nourished both of us, challenging us to grow individually and together. After the workshop, as we were cleaning up the studio, Mason surprised me with a small box. Inside was a beautiful mala bracelet made of rose quartz, the stone of unconditional love. "To remind you of our first pose," he said, holding each other. I put it on immediately, feeling the smooth beads against my skin, a tangible reminder of our journey. Today, a year into our relationship, yoga remains at the core of what we share. We practice together most mornings, starting our day with connection and mindfulness. We face challenges, the stress of running a business, my career transition as I've scaled back my design work to teach yoga part-time, the everyday negotiations of sharing life with another person. But we always come back to the mat, to our breath, to each other. Looking back, I'm amazed at how a simple decision to try something new, to walk into that yoga studio on a rainy Tuesday, changed the course of my life. I had been seeking physical fitness, maybe some stress relief, but what I found was so much more. A practice that healed me, a community that supported me, and a love that transformed me. Mason often says that yoga doesn't just change your body, it changes your life. In my case, it led me to him, to us, to this beautiful practice of holding each other, physically, emotionally, spiritually, through all of life's poses. And for that, I am endlessly grateful. Total_char_count, 17,235.